A science story, huh?
These NYU scientists,
I felt
right.
But I was so
And I just thought, well,
I had figured it out
It was that golden moment.
because science was on my side.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Storyteller, where we bring you true, personal stories about science that remind us just how weird, wonderful, and complicated it is to be human. I'm your host, Misha Gajewski, and in today's episode, both of our storytellers find creative and deeply personal ways to honor the people they love and have lost. These stories are tender, surprising, and really beautiful, and I can't wait for you to hear them. Our first story is from Gwendolyn Napier, aka Miss LuvDrop Storyteller. Her story was recorded last year at a show we did in partnership with Trees Atlanta at our go-to spot, Waller's Coffee Shop. Here's Gwendolyn.
To be or not to be, that is the question. I bought a house in Atlanta 35 years ago. Now, when I bought this house, I wanted to make sure that this house had a nice backyard and a nice front yard, and both yards had trees. I struck gold. My home had some beautiful trees in the front yard and the backyard, but there were no trees on the sidewalk. If you live in Atlanta, we plant trees on the sidewalk so we can marvel and look at the trees as we drive up and down the street. Well, I went to Home Depot and I purchased 3 dogwood trees. They were little switches at first, but I took time to purchase these 3 dogwood trees for 3 members who I love so dearly in my family. I named one tree and took time to plant one tree for Priscilla. Priscilla was one sister I had. She died very young, so I wanted Priscilla to be in my front yard so I could see her every day. I took time to plant the second tree after my mother, and she was living at the time. I called that tree Sarah. And then the last tree that I planted was for my young daughter. Her name was Sherry at the time, and she's still living, but she has grown up and she has moved away, and now she has her own family. I took time to nurture those dogwood trees. I would get on my knees and I would just cultivate the soil. I would give those 3 dogwood trees love and water and just waited for the sun to shine. You see, I love those dogwood trees because they were part of my family. Now, as time went by, if you lived in Atlanta, you know we had some pretty rough weather. And I became devastated when we had that terrible weather. Well, one winter, my dogwood tree for Priscilla, it died. It came out in the springtime. It was beautiful. Everybody would ride down Deckner Avenue in Atlanta and say, "Oh, look at those beautiful dogwood trees." And I would just sit back and say, "Yeah, those trees are mine." But when we had some really tough weather, Priscilla's dogwood tree died. The branches started just falling off and the tree just died. And when that tree died, I was devastated. I was so stressed out because I loved those dogwood trees. Now, the branches started to fall off one by one, and then the tree just split right down the middle. And my neighbor across the street said, "Gwen, I'll help you pull up the stump out of that tree." he got his F-150. He came over, and he connected his truck to the trunk, and he pulled, and he pulled, and he pulled up the stump out of the ground. And when he did, I was crying because I had lost my baby sister. And to see that dogwood tree being removed was like my sister had died all over again. So I wept and I moaned about that dogwood tree. But I realized I had 2 more dogwood trees on my sidewalk. 1 was gone, but 2 were left. Spring came back out again on Deckner. I could see the tree as if it was still there today. I could smell the dogwood tree. I could see the wind blowing in those dogwood trees. And you know, when April showers came with dogwood trees, it would wash all of the beautiful white pebbles off of the tree. And you only had those green leaves left. More bad weather came. And my second dogwood tree died. I cried and I wept. I cried and I wept again. I was getting more and more stressed out about my dogwood trees. When that tree died, my neighbor once again came over with his F-150 truck, and he pulled the tree up. And he pulled, and we wept and we moaned together. But spring came one more time. I had 1 more dogwood tree left, and that was the tree I had for my daughter. When I took time to plant that tree, she was 5 years old. Her tree died just this last fall. What happened, Georgia Power came out and they said, you know, this last dogwood tree is really moving up into the wires on the street. So they took time to trim the top of my tree. And when they trimmed that tree, something happened. The tree split right down the middle. Yes. And that tree also died. You see, I was crying and moaning because those trees were a part of my life. I took time to plant those trees for switches, and I saw them grow just like my family. I moaned and I groaned. I didn't even have an interest to work in the yards anymore. I could work in the yards from sunrise to sunset. But once my trees died, I was dying also on the inside. I was moaning and crying, and I was missing those beautiful dogwood trees. I miss my trees. I miss my trees. Lord, no, I miss my trees. One day they were up, and the next day they were down. Lord, you know I miss my dogwood trees. But life didn't start right there. I got a call from Trees Atlanta. I got a call from Trees Atlanta. And they said, there are no trees on your sidewalk. And I said, no more trees. Because I was devastated. Those trees were like my roots. They were like my story. They were like my dreams and like my glory. I said, no more trees. But then time went by, and I looked at the hole where my daughter's tree was, and I said, maybe. I called them back up and said, please come out and plant that tree. And when they came out, they took time to plant, this time, just one oak tree, just a little switch. And I thought about my own life. I had taken time to take care of my sister, baby sister who was deceased, my mother who was living, then she transitioned, and my daughter who had moved away and had her own family. I said, now it's time to take care of me. So when they took time to plant that oak tree on the sidewalk, was just a little switch, it reminded me of myself as an elder, 70 years old. Just a little switch. I need something to love myself. And every day, I look at that oak tree, that little switch. It's blooming just very slowly. It's growing very slowly in different directions. And then I stand back and look at my own life and say that tree is just like me. And I remember what my grandmother told me. She said, Gwen, it's okay for you to bloom right where you're planted. And as a senior citizen, that's what I'm doing today. I have learned now to love myself. So thank you, Trees Atlanta, for giving me back my life. That is my story. Peace, love, and light.
I really love the idea of planting something to remember the people you love and have lost. There's something about watching things grow season after season that makes that connection feel ongoing. If you'd like to learn more about Gwendolyn, head over to our website, storyclatter.org. Not everyone feels comfortable stepping up to the mic, and that's totally okay. There's another way to make Storyclatter happen, by becoming a donor. At Storyclatter, we know that personal stories can break through the noise, connect people to the human side of science, and make complex ideas feel real. But keeping these stories alive and accessible takes support. Our donors make this possible. They help us produce the podcast, share stories that might otherwise go unheard, and spark conversations that stick with you long after the episode ends. If you believe in the power of science storytelling, consider making a donation at storyclatter.org/donate. Most people give $10 a month, but every tax-deductible gift, big or small, helps keep the mics on and the stories coming. Thank you for helping make sure these stories are heard. So, as an overplanner, I've been making so many checklists of things you apparently need to do before a baby arrives. Sign up for daycare waitlists, organize tiny clothes, research the best stroller, and whether a floor bed is genius or a terrible idea, baby-proof the entire house, read about sleep schedules, and mentally prepare yourself for total chaos. But as a cat parent, there's this whole second layer of logistics too, because no matter how tired you are, no matter how little sleep you get, the cat deserves attention. And so does the litter box, which is why I'm genuinely excited to finally try the Whisker litter robot before the baby arrives. It feels like the kind of upgrade that could make everyday life noticeably easier during a very intense season of life. The litter robot automatically cycles after every use, so there's no daily scooping, and the Whisker app gives you updates and insights like litter levels, usage stats, and even your cat's weight. Honestly, I think the biggest thing is just the mental relief of not having another constant task sitting in the back of your mind. Especially during pregnancy and early parenthood, anything that simplifies your routine feels huge. I also like that Whisker has different models depending on your household size, plus bundles that help you get everything set up all at once. Maintain your cat's litter while focusing on your growing family. Learn more about Whisker litter robot models and starter kits today to get set up before your new baby arrives. Take an additional $50 off bundles with code COLLIDER when you shop whisker.com/collider. That's an additional $50 off bundles with the code COLLIDER at whisker.com/collider. Check out our new podcast called The Persistence Lab, a show from AbbVie that tells the stories of the patients, scientists, and clinicians who are committed to driving real change in medicine and healthcare, and the resilience that pushes them forward. These aren't headlines. They're deeply human moments that show how progress happens, one step at a time. You can find the Persistence Lab now on your favorite podcast platform. Our next story is from writer, performer, and actor Bimini Wright. Her story was recorded earlier this year at Under St. Mark's Theater in New York. Here's Bimini.
I'm 11 years old, and I am sitting on the flybridge of a 40-foot sport fishing boat called the Raptor. I'm clinging to the railing, and my legs are dangling over the edge, and below me, a team of world-class scientists are scurrying around in the cockpit of the boat, fighting seasickness as we roll up and down on the giant waves off the Outer Banks of North Carolina. In the center of the cockpit, an angler is strapped into the fighting chair, pumping furiously on a reel that's about the size of my head. We are hunting giant bluefin tuna, and we've got one on. My father, Captain Peter B. Wright, is behind me at the helm of the boat. Imagine driving a car backwards so that you have your back to the steering wheel and the controls so that you can see what's happening out the back window. He's doing that, but with a 40-foot boat. He has his back to the controls, back to the steering wheel. His hands are busy on the gear and the throttles. His eyes are on the cockpit below, and he's yelling instructions to the deckhands. He throws the boat into reverse, and the air fills with the smell of diesel and black smoke. Later, I will blow my nose, and it will be black. It's January. Now, I am from the tropical part of Australia, so I associate fishing with warm weather. I'm used to snorkeling and sunscreen and wearing a bathing suit and jumping in the ocean to cool off. But here I am sacrificing my summer vacation. It's Australia, January is summer. And I'm wearing thermal underwear, flannel lined jeans, foul weather gear, and beanie gloves fighting off the chill of the saltwater spray. And to be honest, I'm kind of bored. At this point in my life, I've already spent quite a bit of time on boats watching my father's clients catch fish. So, a little bit about my father. I always struggle to sort of describe my father to people that don't know a ton about fishing because, I mean, fishing culture is all about exaggeration, right? It was this big. Sure it was. But you'll just have to take my word for it when I tell you that my dad was a pretty big deal. I've seen strangers ask him for his autograph. I've watched people bid thousands of dollars on him at charity auctions for the honor of having him on their boat for the day. He's hosted television shows, he's written articles, and he's traveled the world. My name, Bimini, is a group of islands in the Bahamas, kind of known for its fishing. Ernest Hemingway lived there for a while. Before anyone asks, just because people do, I was not conceived there, but that is where my father learned how to fish in his teen years. This isn't a normal day of fishing. The tuna that we haul aboard the boat will not be, we're not trying to land a trophy. We're not trying to fill a cooler. It's not going to be eaten. In fact, if everything goes according to plan, the tuna won't be harmed at all. What's happening on the deck below looks pretty chaotic, but there is a carefully choreographed ballet happening underneath it all. And the leader of that ballet is Dr. Barbara Block, a world-renowned marine biologist and professor out of Stanford University. She's here because bluefin tuna are disappearing. Her team is trying to understand how this powerful fish moves through the ocean. Overfishing and climate change has decimated the population, and she's after data to exactly figure out why. But the problem is that bluefin tuna don't really offer themselves up easy for study. It's hard to study an animal that spends all of its time underneath the surface. So science is going to have to borrow the tools of fishermen. And that's where my dad comes in. Now, tuna are a prize, but they don't really fight like other popular sport fish. A marlin, for example, throws these showy athletic displays jumping on the surface, trying to throw the hook. Tuna, on the other hand, tends to sound, which means that they, at the risk of teaching you things, they dive deep and fast. They put up a great fight. Pound for pound, they're the strongest fish in the ocean. But it's fun if you're the one in the chair. It's not really the most entertaining to watch. And I understand that we're here for an important purpose, but I'm cold and I really don't understand the appeal of fishing in the snow. But then I get a glimpse of our quarry. Now, I want you to picture a silver and black football the size of a pony. It flashes against the surface, this just torpedo of pure muscle before it dives again into the inky blue depths. It causes the drag on the reel to scream and process, and the wireman swears as he drops the line that he was holding around his fist. Now, because of who my father is, as I mentioned, at this point in my life, I've seen some big fish. I've caught some big fish. And I'm 11, so I'm that awkward age where in a misguided attempt to seem really mature, you just act like you're unimpressed by everything. But even I, the jaded preteen, cannot help but gasp at the sheer power and size of this monster. So, before he was a celebrity fisherman, my father was a man of science. He actually went to school for marine biology, and it was only a sort of fluke, last-minute trip through Australia on his way back from a graduate studies research trip in the Antarctic that he was set on the path to becoming a game fisherman in the first place. He was a great storyteller, and he would say in jest, never let the truth get in the way of a good story. But when it came to the science, he was actually pretty rigid. I believe it's what made him the best at what he did. He understood physics, which is crucial when you are trying to haul in a 1,400-pound marlin on fishing line that breaks at 130 pounds of resistance. The importance of collecting enough data to make a rational claim was very important. He had no patience for superstition, and fishermen are a pretty superstitious bunch. If a friend of his was like, no, man, this is my lucky lure. This one catches more fish than anyone else. Dad was very fast to point out, of course it catches more fish than any other lure. You put it in the ocean more than any other lure. I remember that he would drill me on the difference between correlation and causation over breakfast. Bop, my nickname was Bop. If every heroin addict drank milk as a child, does that mean that milk causes heroin addiction? No, Dad, obviously not. It's like, okay, well, this article says that, people who eat granola tend to live 10 years on average longer than other people. Does granola equal longer life? No, Dad, it's probably that people who always eat granola also happen to make some, healthier choices. My father really encouraged me to study science, not so much so that I would choose it as a career, although I'm sure he would have been thrilled if I had, but he just wanted me to understand the world. He didn't want me being duped by lazy thinking or half-baked claims. And he always made an effort to introduce me to successful and interesting women in their fields. And so that's why I was here. Women like Dr. Barbara Block. That's why I was watching from above as this team of graduate students and professors out of Stanford and Duke Marine Labs hauled a 6-foot-long fish onto the boat, sticking a hose into its mouth so that oxygenated water would flow over its gills as she cut a little slit into its belly and inserted an archival tracking tag and then sewed it back up again. And I just want to point out, by the way, that this was before we all had GPS in our pockets. You couldn't just get an AirTag on the internet or at the Apple Store. I don't think Apple Stores were a thing at that point either. This was thousands of dollars of cutting-edge technology that they were sticking into a fish and then throwing back in the ocean, just hoping that one day they would get that data back. They did, by the way. Look it up. I can't go into it here. I don't want to do a TED Talk on tuna because that already exists. Tag a Giant, TED Talk, great stuff. They took meticulous measurements. Again, so exaggeration, right? No. The lengths of these fish were all meticulously recorded for science. A fish that was under 70 inches long counted as small. I'm 68 inches tall. So a fish 2 inches taller than me was a small one. And they didn't count as truly big unless they were over 600 pounds. A couple of times I was even permitted to be the one who collected a DNA sample, meaning taking a little tiny sliver out of the second dorsal fin and putting it in a test tube, a responsibility that I now recognize hundreds of graduate students would have killed for. I heard the point made recently that we could all be Nepo babies. It's just that we don't choose to go into the right professions. And although I did actually originally enroll in college for marine biology, I obviously took a different path. But what's funny is that in his later years, my father actually said that he was in the entertainment business because taking people fishing was entertaining them after all. His entire life, though, my father remained dedicated to science. And like I said, I believe it's what made him really good. Alzheimer's is a bitch of a disease. And Dr. Block herself actually commented in my father's final years just how cruelly ironic it was that my father, of all people that she knew, was losing his mind to it. But when he was first diagnosed, he was actually accepted into a drug trial, which was very exciting for multiple reasons. Obviously, he was getting access to cutting-edge medicine that wasn't on the market yet. But more than that, he found a lot of personal meaning in the fact that even in his deterioration, it would be measured, tracked, and contribute to science. The year that my dad died, the Tag-A-Giant Foundation tagged their 2,000th tuna. And on that satellite pop-up tag was a mixture of resin and my father's ashes. We'd already given my father a bit of a Viking funeral. That's a whole other story. I couldn't get it to sink. But they released this huge fish into the ocean with my father on it. His ashes don't contribute to the data. It's purely sentimental. They don't make the science more precise or better in any way, but it really feels right that a man who spent his life observing, measuring, and respecting the ocean became part of the record anyway. Thank you.
That story broke my heart, and what a special and perfect way to honor and remember Bimini's dad. If you'd like to learn more about Bimini, visit our website, storyclatter.org. If you'd like to hear more science stories, you can always head to our website or follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Head to storyclatter.org to become a financial supporter. If you're interested in coming to one of our shows, starting a Storyclatter show in your own community, or even learning how to tell your own science story, that's all on our website too. And if you enjoy this podcast, tell a friend, share an episode, introduce someone to Storyclatter, and help bring more people into the world of science storytelling. This podcast is produced by me, Misha Gajewski, along with Jen Chen, Nikisha Roberts-Washington, and Aaron Barker. The stories featured in today's episode were produced by Mesa Salida, Kelly Vinyl, Aaron Barker, and Brad Lawrence. Special thanks goes out to Storyclatter's board and team. Our theme music is by Ghost, and next week we'll be back with a best of Storyclatter episode from our archive. Until next time, thanks so much for listening. As I get ready to become a parent, I realized there's an overwhelming amount of advice out there. Every app, article, and random stranger seems to have a completely different opinion on what you're supposed to do, which is why I've really been enjoying All the Hacks lately. It's hosted by Chris Hutchins, and the show is all about smarter ways to improve your life, whether that's money, travel, productivity, or in this case, parenting. One episode I especially loved is Debunking the Biggest Parenting Myths with Emily Oster. If you know Emily's work, you know she's amazing at cutting through the fear and guilt with actual data and research. In the episode, they tackle some of the biggest parenting debates and misconceptions, and honestly, it made me feel a lot calmer about navigating all the noise that comes with prepping for a baby. Even beyond parenting, All the Hacks is packed with practical ideas and fascinating conversations that genuinely make life feel a little easier. So, search for All the Hacks. That's All the Hacks in your podcast app, hit follow, and start upgrading your life today.
Booking a Vrbo vacation rental means you get Vrbo Care and 24/7 life support, verified reviews from real guests, and top-rated homes with the Love by Guest filter.
I just booked my Vrbo because there was a sweet wine fridge.
We all have our reasons. If you know, you Vrbo. Terms apply. See Vrbo.com/trust for details.